We have big trouble implementing frontier breakthrough. We don't have a proper financial ecosystem of innovation. We don't have enough venture capital. We don't have proper institutional investors, which finances innovation in larger firms. But I can see that UK should also be part with France and Germany. So I see those as elements of hope, but I believe very much in a coalition of the willing approach.
Philippe Aghion, who won the 2025 Nobel Prize for Economics, was very surprised when he got the call. But the fact that he won was not a surprise at all. He has this theory about the new replacing the old, and he's passionate about the dynamic economic model of innovation known as creative destruction. This concept describes how new ideas, practices and technologies emerge by replacing the old and obsolete. A theory of sustainable growth driven by innovation. He's a professor at institutions including the Collège de France, INSEAD and the London School of Economics, and he previously taught at Harvard and MIT. We caught up with him at his apartment in Paris. Take a look.
Philippe Aghion, thank you for taking the time today, and maybe begin by saying congratulations on winning the Nobel Prize.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And as we've been saying, life has been a bit of a swirl, I imagine, since then. I'd like to start maybe looking back. Your mother, Gabi, was
Yes.
founder of Chloé.
Yes.
And created the concept of luxury, ready-to-wear fashion.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's fair to say that innovation, which is one of your main areas of expertise, is in your blood?
There is my mother, and absolutely, and I think she deserves full credit for having changed fashion. But my father was also an innovator in his own way. He wanted to do social revolution in Egypt, and he was very active in the, pushing the nascent Egyptian surrealist movement. And so both my parents, when they came to Paris, became to be very close to the French surrealists, Éluard, Aragon, Zara, the father of Dadaism, and Mata, the Chilean artist, and they were very close to all this crowd. And so I grew up in my early childhood, particularly. So my mother, on the one hand, but also, those friends of my father, like Mata and others, were also creators. So I've been, brought up among creators or people with revolutionary ambitions, or that I would say the whole thing. But it was mainly the fact that I was very socially motivated. I wanted to do the revolution. I was in the Communist Party in France. And I wanted to change the world, and I came to realize that it was important to understand economics, to sort out who is right and who is wrong, to tell apart who is right and who is, and that's how I started to question myself in economics, right, to this day.
So, in many ways, sort of merging the creative and economics, then, and bringing the two together.
Well, exactly. I think it was the creation and the social motivation, and it's true also that I had some mathematical training. And when you are trained in math, it's easier for you to go into economic modeling. I think that combination might have played a role.
And this leads well into one of the ideas, the idea of creative destruction. Can you define this for me in a clear way?
Yeah. How creative destruction is this term has been coined by Joseph Schumpeter. It refers to the process whereby new innovations displace old technologies, make them obsolete. So I thought it was a very cute idea. But when I was in my students' years, Schumpeter was a curiosity. Well, you would mention his name in a course on history of economic thought, or in a course in IO, but it would be en passant. There would not be a full-fledged course on Schumpeter, but there was no model and there was no empirics. So with my co-author Peter Howitt, who is a co-winner of this year's Nobel Prize, we decided to build from scratch a new growth model, a new growth paradigm that would embody the notion of creative destruction, and would rest on three main ideas. Long-run growth results from cumulative process of innovation, where each innovator builds upon previous innovations. You stand on shoulders giants. Second idea, innovations result mainly from entrepreneurial activities that are pursued with the prospect of innovation rents. If I discover a better product or cheaper way to produce, I get some rents for a while until I'm superseded by subsequent innovators. And the third idea is creative destruction. New innovation displace old technologies. And at the very heart of this social paradigm growth model, there is a contradiction. On the one hand, you need the innovation rents to motivate innovation activities. But on the other hand, yesterday's innovators are very tempted to use their rents to prevent subsequent innovations because they don't want themselves to be subject to creative destruction. And managing market economy is all about how you manage this contradiction. It comes all the time. You come across this contradiction all the time.
So in some ways, this is a way of maybe enhancing capitalism.
It's a way to enhance capitalism, and there are the people who have written on protect capitalism against capitalists, because the danger is that yesterday's innovators turn into entrenched incumbents and prevent new innovation. They try to collude with governments, and that's why you need civil society to make sure this will not happen. But really, growth is nurtured by a constant process of entry of new talents. It's very important that new talents can enter, develop, blossom, and make sure that once they blossom, they don't use their rents to prevent new talents to come in. And that's the whole process of economic growth. So it's a completely new way to look at growth economics.
Mm-hmm. And looking at Europe today, do you think there's a problem with the innovation mindset in Europe? Do you think that there is one, or?
There is a problem that very much that Draghi or other people have pointed out, is that in Europe we remain circumscribed to incremental mid-tech innovation. We have big trouble, implementing frontier breakthrough. We used to do it in the 19th century, but lately we had problems, coming to grip with breakthrough frontier innovation. And the question is, why are we failing? We were very good at catching up after World War II with the US and, essentially a lot by rebuilding our capital stock thanks to the Marshall Plan, also by imitating the Industrial Revolution of the 1920s, electricity, thanks to the education system we have. So imitation-based growth, we are very good catching up growth. And we caught up between 1945 and the late 80s. But then, the IT revolution came about in the US and then we had big trouble ourselves, adopting the IT revolution or taking maximum advantage of it. And a lot because we don't have an integrated market for goods and services, where we allow bigger rents for innovators and also more competition. The second thing, we don't have a proper financial ecosystem of innovation. We don't have enough venture capital. We don't have proper institutional investors like pension funds, mutual funds, which finances innovation in larger firms. And we don't have the equivalent of DARPA, Defense Advanced Project Agency of the US, which is a very modern way to do industrial policy, a pro-competition way to do industrial policy. We don't have the equivalent. So on all those dimensions, we are lagging behind the US. And that the Draghi report said, no, we should get our acts together and do, try to make progress, to really have Europe achieve, implement breakthrough high-tech innovations.
How optimistic would you be that Europe will achieve this?
Look, my optimism is a kind of fighting optimism. It's not like it will happen. But I think that my feeling is that Germany is more now on a mode of investing with Merz and Jakob von Weizsäcker behind him. I think those guys they are very much into investment. Britain wants also to play a game with us, to play ball with us again. That I think is very important. On the DARPA, for example, I can see that UK should also be part with France and Germany. So I see those as elements of hope, but I believe very much in a coalition of the willing approach. I don't think we will do much 27 countries. Apparently, there was 4 weeks ago, there was a Draghi plus 1 year conference, and they estimated that like about 14% of the Draghi report has been implemented. I don't think you can go well beyond that with all 47 countries, but you should have some countries that take the lead, and I think France, Germany, Britain. I don't know if Italy would be part or not part. I don't know if Sweden would be part of it, and then other countries can join in. I believe much more in a coalition of the willing approach.
You mentioned competition there,
yeah.
And you've argued for more competition. How exactly would that help to improve the situation, to improve Europe's situation right now? How do you bring about more competition?
I think the problem with competition policy, you have a good competition commission in Europe, but it's a bit like kind of very traditional, conservative in a sense. I mean, I think it's doing a good job. I mean, I don't want to do any bashing of the competition commission. It does a lot of very good job. But there are various pitfalls, I mean, or things that should evolve. One thing is that they are very static. They look at market share, market definition, market share. They don't have a dynamic view. For example, if I allow whether or not to allow for a merger and acquisition, I should look at the dynamic effects on future entry, future innovation, not just look at the market share. And the market share may not be always the right criteria. Siemens, Alstom, when the competition commission, argued against this merger, it was not obvious to me that it was, you should look at market share. After all, it's a contestable market. You could buy a fast train from China. So, there is a kind of very, traditional conservative competition policy. And also, in the name of competition policy in Europe, we precluded any form of industrial policy, any form of sectoral state aid. I think this is not right. DARPA shows the DARPA example that you can do industrial policy which is pro-competition. The way it works, money comes from the ministry, from DARPA, the defense ministry. Then they have team leaders, from academia or industry, and they have 3-5 years to achieve a mission, put a man in space, produce this kind of weaponry, and they elicit competing projects to do that. The equivalent of DARPA for biotech was BARDA, the Biomedical Advanced Research Development Authority, for the RNA messenger vaccines, thanks to which we are all here today. You had the same way that you had a team leader, and they elicited competing labs who produced these RNA messenger vaccines. So I think there is a way, and you see, Europe should evolve, should have a more dynamic view of competition policy, and also be more open to properly govern industrial policy.
When we talk about industrial policy and innovation, China inevitably comes up. Yeah. And because of the unusual political structure in China, I mean, and so much in China is political rather than economic. To what extent do you think people are aware of the challenge of China in Europe? Do you think that
they underestimate? I mean, China, for example, they manage, or they do differently from us. They do more like yardstick competition. They start various projects and they compare between them. But so it's a big country, also it makes it easier. And so they manage to reconcile in their own way, industrial policy and competition. And we should emulate. I don't think we should adopt the Chinese model, but in that respect, they did better than we did.
But how does that, just trying to think how that would be brought about in a European context? I suppose it's like you say, it's not going to work for every country, is it?
No, but we should do a DARPA, between the coalition of the willing, a French-German DARPA, for example. Macron met with Merz a month ago, and we produced, or 5 weeks ago, I think, we produced a joint memo with Monika Schnitzer, who is at the head of economic advisors in Germany, and Xavier Jarabel, who is at the head of economic advisors in France. And we said, well, you're meeting, why don't implement Draghi between France and Germany? So why don't you have an integrated French-German market for high-tech? Number one, why not have our own, institutional investors between France and Germany? And why not push for French-German DARPA? So that and a mega center in AI. Giga center in AI.
Yeah, and that's of course that's a whole new area now that we're going to be dealing with.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Given in today's sort of fractured geopolitical environment, how do you define economic power?
I think economic power comes from various sources. Of course, when you have the dollar or the euro, I think it gives you power. That, I think, is a fact. I mean, the fact of having a strong currency. Respected currency gives you power. But I think that you have power when you innovate. I don't think you can have much power if you are lagging behind. That's why it's so important that Europe catches up with the US and now with China and becomes, for example, we don't miss the AI revolution. It's very crucial that we should not miss it. And that we, innovate in high-tech breakthrough. It's very important because if you don't control the value chains and therefore you lose bargaining power.
And just looking at how important is regulation in all of this, and particularly when we talk about AI,
But the problem with regulation, I think it's good to regulate, of course, because otherwise you have abuse and you need to protect individuals. I think it's very important to regulate. We cannot have a town without green lights, red lights. Would be chaotic. Okay, so I believe in the need to regulate. But too many regulations become an entry barrier to new firms. The large incumbents know how to deal with the regulations, and the new entrants are deterred by excessive regulation. And so that's why you have to be very careful when you regulate, because you can get in the way of more competition.
Looking at AI and talking about regulation, and there's obviously a lot of debate about how to regulate AI, is there an easy answer to that? Is there an easy solution?
I will not tell you regulate this, don't regulate that, and go into detail. You need obviously regulation. The whole issue is that if you over-regulate and AI escapes Europe, at the end of the day, you end up with even less regulated AI. So you have to that's where the geopolitics takes. You have to take into account that the regulation you do will have an impact on where the AI goes. And if the AI escapes Europe and goes to even less regulated places, it would have failed the purpose. So I think that we should. So regulators should internalize this kind of considerations.
Do you think that that AI has become a kind of a bogeyman, almost like a fear? Do you think there's too much focus on the fear aspect of AI?
Yeah, exactly. I think it has power. AI automates tasks in the production of goods and services, the production of ideas, because it's much easier to innovate with AI. So AI has a big growth potential. On top of that, AI has employment creation potential. I mean, we have done a survey for the report that we produced for Macron last year, with Anne Bouvreau and Yann Lequin, this whole AI commission. We were co-chairing with Anne. And we with my co-author, Simon Bunel, we performed a study. We surveyed 9,000 firms in France with more than 50 employees. And we looked at those who adopt AI. We compared the evolution of employment with similar firms that have not yet adopted AI. They create employment overall. Why? Because there is a productivity effect. When you adopt AI, you become more productive, more competitive. Therefore, the world market for your product expands, and therefore you employ more. This productivity effect is there. There is, of course, the counteracting substitution effect, whereby AI replaces manpower. But for French firms, overall, it seems that so far the productivity effect dominates. So it's important to put in place institutions that will enhance this productivity effect. Good education systems and good flex security systems, like in Denmark. When you lose your job in Denmark for 2 years, you get 90% of your salary. The state retrains you and helps you find a new job. We should put we could generalize this system. If we have good education system and good flex security, I think we can harness the employment creation power of AI, the positive impact of AI on employment. And if we reform our competition policy, then we can enhance the growth-enhancing power of AI, because I told you AI has the power of enhancing growth, but the problem is the lack of competition may defeat the purpose, because then you will have a few large firms that will deter and discourage new entrants. That's what happened with the IT revolution. With the advent of IT, you had the emergence of superstar firms, Google, Microsoft, Walmart. At the beginning, they carried the growth process in the US. They boosted growth. But eventually, through excessive merger and acquisition, they became tentacular, and they ended up discouraging entry of new firms. So I want to avoid that the same happens with AI. Hence the importance of many things you can do to foster competition: open source, data sharing, make sure that the whole value chain, the Digital Market Act applies to the whole value chain of AI, including the cloud. You have only 3 big actors in the cloud: Google, Microsoft, and Facebook, I think. And you have only 1 big actor, GPU, in market for graphic processors. That's not good. So you should really make the whole value chain of AI more competitive. That's very important. And avoid too many regulations, because we know too many regulations become an entry barrier to new firms.
Do you think in the age of Trump that these kind of things are going to be possible? Do you think what's happening, say, in the US is something fundamental, or are these superficial changes? Or
I think they're fundamental. I don't think they will disappear if Trump is no longer in power. And I think a lot of that is because they didn't have flex security system of Denmark. Many people suffered from the technological transformation and from globalization. Had they implemented a system like in Denmark, I think there would have been much less demand for, populism more generally. Yeah, that's the problem.
Do you think sometimes with Trump that it's a style issue, that actually some of the things are, that people tend to get hysterical when they...
No, of course. I mean, the guy, is very special, and there are many things to dislike about him. But I must say, in the Middle East, he's doing a good job. He's doing what Biden was unable to do, to be honest. I mean, I'm not praising Trump, but it's true that he can surprise us. There are many things that were, what I find, not to be supported. But it's true that with the Middle East, I'm very impressed by what he has achieved so far.
Yeah. Look, listening to you now, I see you have this journey from, being involved in the Communist Party, background in the creatives, to moving towards, to enhancing capitalism. How would you...
So in fact, I will tell you something. When I was a communist, my role model was Berlinguer. In fact, if you know the movie next door, there is a movie theater next door, and they have a movie on Berlinguer. Voilà. Berlinguer was a kind of very open communist leader. And in fact, he was for the compromesso historico, which was a compromise with the Christian democracy. And they achieved it. They created the Democrat Party in Italy, and they became good social democrats. I could say that I keep having that in mind as a role model. In the same way as the world has changed. I mean, we know now that communism as a system doesn't work, that it produces a lot of drama, a lot of undesirable things. But on the other hand, the communist parties in Western Europe were defending, workers and pushing for more social justice, and that part I take. You see what I mean? And more social mobility, but we know you can achieve social mobility through social democracy or gaullisme social or social liberalism, call it the way you want. So I still have the same, I want prosperity, shared prosperity, and I want growth which is friendly. That's why I like the flex security system. I want a creativity structure which is socially, geared. You see what I mean? But I believe that the market economy is the better system, and free market economy. I believe very much in democracy, in a good social model, in green. But the market economy so far is the system that allowed us to achieve those. But I want a market economy which takes the social element seriously. So I am Schumpeterian, but I'm a Schumpeterian. And I believe, you see what's very interesting, if you adopt the flex security, the Danish flex security, you make creative destruction work better, that enhances innovation. And at the same time, you protect individuals. So it's not that you have either or. It's not that you have to be either for innovation or for social protection and inclusion. You can do things that will make you both more innovative and more inclusive. For example, flex security will education. More education means that you have more people can become innovators, a good education system. And that's good for inclusiveness and for, innovation-based growth. And also competition. More competition means that more entrants can come in. That boosts social mobility. So you boost innovation and you boost social mobility. So I don't believe that you have to oppose, the goal of social mobility, achieving social mobility, and the goal of achieving, more growth through creative destruction.
Well, thank you very much today
it was a pleasure.
For taking that. Yeah,
thank you so much.
So interesting. Yeah,
thank you. Excellent. Thank you.
That was Philippe Aghion, winner of the 2025 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences, speaking to us in Paris.